Okay, let's get started. Welcome everyone to our first advisor only webinar. We're really excited to be sharing more today with you. So just a couple of housekeeping bits before I hand over Phil to get going. Just to let you know, the session will be recorded and we're more than happy to send that out tomorrow. The chat is closed just to protect anonymity really, but of course you can ask direct questions. We'll either answer those as we go, or if more relevant, we'll leave them to the end. We also have the white paper listed in the materials tab. So we're going to be talking a lot about the white paper today. It is there for you. You can download it directly. And of course, I'll be sending that out in the follow-up. So Phil, I think that's all of our housekeeping. So we're going to be talking about the new expectations facing people and culture advisors. I'm going to hand you over to Phil Spratt.
Thanks very much, Lucy, and thanks everyone for joining. Great to be hosting our first advisor-only webinar, as Lucy says. We've got folks joining from US, Canada, Scandinavia, and Central Europe, as well as Singapore. So a very warm welcome, whatever time of day it is, wherever you're joining from. As you can see on the slide, I'm Phil. I'm the CEO of Deltabase. Co-founded the business 7 years ago, and in a past life, I was a management consultant. Helping clients with strategy, transformation, M&A engagements, but always with a focus on the people, the culture, the organizational side of transformation. And we set Deltabase up because myself and my co-founders, who are also ex-consultants, what we found during our consulting time was that actually it was the quality of people and culture and behaviors and leadership that were the biggest determinants of when companies were successful in strategy, transformation, and M&A scenarios. But we found that they were areas that were least well served when it came to quality data to enable data-led decision making. So we created Deltabase to fill that gap. We've commissioned a recent study into culture measurement and culture insight. And this webinar is all about sharing the results from that webinar with you guys, and hopefully it'll help give a little bit of a window into the challenges that clients are facing and the things that they need help with most from advisors. So just briefly before we start delving into the results of the webinar, just a real quick bit of context on who we are and where we fit into the ecosystem. So Deltabase is a people and culture intelligence and benchmarking platform that we've very specifically built to support strategy, transformation, and M&A use cases across three main lenses. So what we do is we provide really detailed and accurate benchmarking data that compares companies to their direct competitors across three main areas that you can see represented on the slide there: workforce, talent, and culture. We've got two principal products. We've got Deltabase One, which is a self-service intelligence and benchmarking platform that our users can use to compare companies against competitors across those three main areas. And then we've got Deltabase Listen, which is a real-time continuous listening alternative to periodic engagement surveys. We were really proud to win an award last year for best use of technology and analytics at the Business Culture Awards, which was great recognition for us. And as of December, we're now backed by two venture capital funds, one in Liverpool and one in Manchester here in the UK. When it comes to culture, which is what we're going to be spending the majority of our time looking at together today, we've got a framework of 12 culture and EVP topics that we've developed alongside the behavioral science team of one of our big four customers, who was an early adopter of our solution. And what we've got there is kind of 6 topics that are really well aligned into cultures and behaviors, and 6 topics that are more about employee expectations, employee experience. So we get a very comprehensive view of a company's overall culture and EVP strengths and weaknesses. And we analyze employee voice essentially across 3 main channels. There's an external channel, which is kind of external listening, looking at sources of online employee voice from employee review sites, etc. And then we've got 2 internal channels, one being Deltabase Listen, that real-time listening app, and the second being the ability to upload historical engagement surveys and analyze free text comments. So essentially what we do is we turn free text employee voice into quantified sentiment across this comprehensive framework of 12 culture and EVP topics. And I'll show you an example a little bit later on after we've looked at the survey findings from the topical example this week of SpaceX and Tesla. So in terms of the research, so why did we commission the research in the first place? Well, we spend all of our time supporting some of the world's leading consultancies with insight benchmarking that they can use with their clients across strategy, transformation, and M&A use cases. And so what we wanted to do was really understand where clients are having challenges at the moment around culture measurement and taking action and improving their culture, to understand priorities that will then shape client demand. We wanted to understand where clients were kind of becoming a little bit unstuck when it comes to their culture initiatives, to understand where advisors might need better tools and insight to help them help clients. We wanted to understand where leaders are kind of feeling like they are running out of gas and wanting advisors to kind of step in and assist. And also we wanted to really explore as well the role of AI in understanding and acting upon culture insight. So it's the first 2 of those that we're going to spend most time on understanding today, and I think we'll probably do a follow-on webinar to unpack the second set of those after this one. So why does this matter now? Why did we decide to sponsor this study and this research right now? Well, 3 main reasons. I mean, one is there is just more and more data available on employee experience and employee sentiment. So with the explosion of workplace tools, of social media channels, etc., there's more and more places for employees to share their experiences of the workplace. Secondly, we are going through, I think, and we have been for the last sort of 5 years or so, going through a pretty significant period of changing employee expectations. When we think about the impacts of the COVID pandemic, then the subsequent lockdowns and shift to remote working, look at a new generation of workers coming into the workforce, so Generation Z entering the workforce since just before the pandemic, but also in some sectors particularly struggling with challenges of an aging workforce. Like, we've got a really interesting time around shifting employee expectations that really must be understood in order to be managed and for companies to get the most out of their culture. And then finally, and I think arguably this is potentially the most significant of the 3, we are in the foothills now of the most significant workforce impact that we are likely to see within our generation. So with the advent of AI transformation, the impacts that agentic AI is already having on the workforce of some organizations in some sectors, there'll be many, many more that are not yet impacted that surely will be within the next sort of 5 to 10 years. There's no more important time, we don't believe, than now to really pay very close attention to the employee experience, to culture and behaviors as workforces are going through an unprecedented period of change and of impact. So that's why we think this is a very important thing for us to understand right now. So just about the research, and there is a copy of this that you are welcome to download. So at the top of your screen here, you should be able to see materials. If you click on the materials tab, there's a little document icon with a paperclip. You'll be able to download a PDF copy of the white paper itself if you haven't already downloaded it. It was contributed to by 158 organizations, by a predominantly senior HR leadership stakeholder group, so 2/3 in director or senior management, 96% of respondents being manager level upwards. We had organisations large and small taking part. You can see some logos there of some of the larger organisations that participated. The average employee size was 4,000 employees, and we've got quite a wide range of sectors represented as well. So 12 sectors in total, and you can see some examples there. So it's a pretty broad participation in terms of the sectors and organisations represented. So we're gonna explore together two major gaps that the research found. The first is a measurement gap. The second is a visibility gap. So in the measurement gap, one of the things that we found is around what tools are people using to measure and monitor culture. And the engagement survey is the most common tool of choice for that. We also unpacked how often people are measuring, and around about half of organization measure culture annually. And the really interesting thing about this is that actually over half of leaders reported that they lack confidence in whether their culture data actually drives to action. So there's clearly something that's not working at the moment in terms of how organizations are measuring culture. So we'll just take a quick look at each of those in turn, overlaid with some of the insight that we've got from HR leaders around the specific challenges and pain points. So the first one's around the engagement survey as the tool of choice. One of the things that we've heard about engagement surveys, I mean, there's a number of different downsides that HR teams are very much cited on. One of them is that sense of survey fatigue. So I think people appreciate that employees are pretty sick of being asked to fill in surveys for not just the engagement survey, but all manner of different purposes across an organization. But yet they still remain the go-to tool for almost 80% of organizations. The other pain point we hear is about levels of trust. So recent research has shown that that 37% of employees don't actually trust that the engagement survey is anonymous. It's quite often line management that are encouraging employees to complete the survey. So it's natural that employees would be suspicious of the level of anonymity that's in there. And that, of course, does impact the honesty of responses that are received. And then other challenges are more about how recent the insight is. When someone fills a survey in, they might be reflecting on things that happened, months and months ago, if they haven't had the chance to provide feedback since the prior year. And it makes it very difficult to kind of really prioritize what needs to change. So interesting that the engagement survey is the tool for choice, despite those very significant drawbacks that we hear around that as a listening tool. The next thing I think is quite interesting from the study is around the frequency of measurement. So the most common frequency of measurement that we heard on the survey is 42%. Is annually. So 42%, almost half of organizations are essentially only polling their workforce once a year, which is interesting because everyone who's on this call who's involved in advising clients with culture will, I'm sure, appreciate that culture behaviors, it's something that happens every minute of every day. It's not something that happens once a year. So there's a real disconnect there in terms of how important this is as a topic and how infrequently organizations have access to data around what's going on and how their workforce is feeling and reporting upon culture and behaviors. And this, of course, creates blind spots between surveys. It means that challenges, issues, risks can really start to take hold long before they're actually captured within surveys. Bit of a spoiler alert, but we'll unpack this in the next advisor webinar. But we did also explore how long it takes organizations to action the results from their surveys. And the vast majority of respondents said it takes longer than 3 months for them to action the results of the survey. So there's a real pace of response, which is a significant challenge for clients at the moment. And of course, that then starts to erode employee trust even further if they're not seeing action being taken from the engagement surveys that they're investing time in completing. And then the final thing in the measurement gap relates to confidence of being able to drive action. I think this is quite an astonishing statistic. It really shows that there is significant room for improvement here in terms of actually driving action out of the investments that are being made in listening and culture measurement. Some of the underlying challenges that we've learned from HR leaders here result in the level of effort that's required to turn the culture data into insight that is actionable. A lot of HR teams lack the skills and capabilities in-house around analytics to really be able to do that efficiently and effectively. So clearly there's a role for advisors to support with that. We hear that also the culture data, when it's viewed in isolation and not within the context of competitors and sector averages and best practice, makes it really hard to know what good actually looks like. So when you see an engagement score, it's difficult to know whether that's a really bad engagement score that everyone needs to drive action behind, or whether actually for the market, for the sector, it's actually not a bad score at all. So that lack of external reference points erodes confidence, is what we've heard. And we've also seen that there's challenges with the disconnect between the insight and then the way in which it is used to make decisions. Final point, data, organizations could have the best data in the world. If there isn't leadership buy-in to actually take action, listen to employees and make changes based on what employees are saying, then there's not going to be action taken. And we have heard quite an alarming rate of respondents report that actually they struggle to get leadership buy-in to take action after the back of the survey. So there's clearly a buy-in and stakeholder engagement element to this as well. The next gap that the study exposed is what we've termed here the visibility gap, which again I think is very, very interesting. This relates to organizations reporting that they do not have visibility of key culture risks. So about 2/3 of organizations don't have visibility into key culture risks. Just under 1/3 of organizations don't have visibility on pain points that are driving attrition. And the alarming majority of organizations have told us that they just simply don't know how their strengths and weaknesses from a culture and EVP standpoint compare to their competitors and their peers. So in terms of the visibility of risks, I mean, one of the challenges there comes back to the tool that's being used to run the measurement. So I'm sure folks on the call will be familiar with the concept of survey bias. When it comes to measuring risks, a survey is a question-based tool. So obviously it gives data, feedback on the questions that are asked. It does not surface risks that are related to questions that perhaps should have been asked. So there's a challenge there around how survey bias leads us to miss areas that are important to employees and indeed culture risks. The others are kind of related to that frequency of polling, I think. So these next three, we've got challenges there around the engagement surveys really giving lagging indicators. They're giving us a rear view mirror into what's happened in the last year, rather than kind of emerging changes in behavior and culture early enough to take action. There's no real-time surfacing of risks and challenges as a result. And there's a real missed opportunity for predictive analytics. So predictive analytics is incredibly powerful at heading off risks before they turn into problems. But with the infrequent measurement of culture once a year, there simply isn't enough data being gathered frequently enough for predictive analytics to be valid and of value. So there's something that can be unlocked there if we can manage to find a way to increase that frequency of measurement. In terms of driving pain points, understanding pain points that drive attrition, this is a very, very significant missed opportunity. Now, a lot of organizations, when they do the engagement survey, one of the things they're really trying to do is make sure that they can reduce the rates of unwanted attrition. So what's going wrong here? I think one of the interesting talking points here is the difference between engagement and culture. Now, when we ask organizations, how do you measure culture? most organizations say, well, we do an engagement survey. Well, the reality is the engagement survey, and the clue's in the title, I suppose, the engagement survey measures engagement. So we get metrics on how engaged a workforce is, how that might change from year to year, how that might vary by department. But what we don't get to see is the underlying root causes that are driving disengagement. And that's where the kind of the 12-topic culture and EVP framework that I mentioned towards the start of the call comes in, really drilling into those root causes. So there's challenges there with people being able to understand the reasons why there are engagement problems, the reasons why there is a higher rate of unwanted attrition in an organization. This makes it really tricky for leaders to prioritize. And of course, without understanding the root causes, it's really difficult to build a comprehensive and coherent action plan that's really going to make a difference in terms of driving changes in levels of attrition. And then the final point here is about the visibility of culture strengths and weaknesses against peers. And I think this it comes down to a tooling challenge. I think with engagement surveys, it's typically very difficult to get like-for-like comparisons between competitors because companies don't typically share the results of their engagement surveys. Some culture and listening tools have got anonymized sector average benchmarks in there, which is certainly better than nothing. It can give a little bit of context around strengths and weaknesses versus averages, but still doesn't give that specific direct competitor comparison insight, which would be the ultimate context really for HR leaders to prioritize where they're going to place their focus for culture initiatives. And what that means is, strengths go unnoticed, weaknesses remain hidden, and that can result in investments being placed in the wrong areas. So overinvestment in areas that are already cultural strengths, and underinvestment in areas and weaknesses which have been hidden. So it'd be good to kind of bring this into some context for folks, and to just demonstrate some of the types of analysis and insight that we provide to our consulting partners, so they can use it with their clients. As I mentioned, a really topical one. So SpaceX is going to IPO this week. I think Friday is the date when the general public will be able to purchase shares in SpaceX for the first time. And it has been rumored that a future plan, once SpaceX is a public organization, will be a merger between SpaceX and Tesla, one of the biggest M&A transactions in history, if it does indeed go ahead. And so with the combined market cap, it's slightly uncertain depending on how analysts view the transaction. It's estimated that will be between 2.3 trillion and 3.4 trillion of enterprise value in a combined SpaceX and Tesla entity, which would place it, depending on where it comes in that range, between fourth and sixth largest organization on the planet by market cap. So I just want to demonstrate here, using these two organizations, how some of our culture benchmarking and insight can help to bring in that real context and focus around strengths and weaknesses versus competitors. So if you look at the chart in the middle here, that's extracted from our platform. It's based on the external listening channel that I mentioned earlier on. One of the things we can see is that both organizations have got a reasonably similar shape. So there are some hallmark shared weaknesses, which we do observe in other Musk enterprises, such as X, formerly known as Twitter. And that's around, very, very negative sentiment towards work-life balance, towards the level of support from leadership. There's very much a sort of a do or die and you're on your own kind of mentality within these organizations. And also pretty poor sentiment towards diversity and inclusion as well. So both organizations share those characteristics. We do see some differentiation and some standout strengths, though, that SpaceX has got relative to Tesla. The biggest difference being in purpose. So that sense of purpose for SpaceX employees is a much stronger part of the EVP than it is for Tesla employees. SpaceX also has advantages around levels of empowerment, sentiment towards technology, agility and career progression. And meanwhile, Tesla has got strengths over SpaceX for sentiment towards collaboration and pay and rewards. But as we'll see, we'll take a deep dive now into the topic of purpose. We'll see that progress isn't a straight line. So taking a look now at how sentiment towards purpose has evolved over the years at SpaceX, we can see that between 21 and 2025, we've actually got a pretty stable sentiment towards purpose at SpaceX, aside of 1 year, 2023. And within Tesla, we've actually got a gradually declining sentiment towards this topic from 2021 all the way through to 2025. So that differentiation, that advantage that SpaceX has got over Tesla in this space is one that's actually growing over time. But let's take a look at what happened in 2023. I mean, there's a very, very significant blip in the data there. And it turns out that actually in 23, it was quite a tough year for SpaceX and for its employees. So that started with the SpaceX Starship self-destructing during a test flight over the Gulf of Mexico. It was badged as a success externally. Lots of data was gathered from that mission, but actually, reality is there was some very, very significant damage done to the launch platforms during that test, which was a major setback for the program. It actually garnered enhanced focus from the regulators and from environmental groups as well, and that resulted in the program essentially being grounded for 7 months. So for an organization whose purpose is all linked to that mission of making mankind a two-planet species, and with sights set on Mars, that was a fairly significant knock to the workforce during that time. And what made it worse was that there was still pressure to run slightly less sexy but commercially attractive launches of Starlink satellites. I think 100,000 Starlink satellites were launched during that particular year, which is a very different type of work and mission. And also, it's the year after Musk had acquired Twitter. He ended up spending a great deal of his time and energy stabilizing and transforming Twitter into X. And during that time, really, SpaceX was led by the COO. So again, there's that change in leadership that can often have quite a big impact on the workforce's sense of purpose and mission, which I think we're seeing coming through in the data there. So one of the things, just recapping on the study that we've talked through there, one of the things that we found is that as we go through this journey of getting kind of culture data and measurement right through to driving impact, is that there are challenges that make this harder and harder the further through that process you go. So we've learned that most organizations have some kind of culture or engagement data. We've seen that some of those are able to turn that into insight that exposes the underlying issues. Around about a third of organizations are able to do that. But then what we see is that this gets trickier and trickier the further through the process you go. So we've seen that the ability to prioritize is highly compromised. Clients need a lot of help with that prioritization. They struggle with being able to turn the insight into action, and of course, it's that end impact, which is what leaders and people involved in employee listening and culture measurement really are wanting to drive. So the role of advisors in this, many of you guys, I'm sure, will be doing all of these things with your clients. But the overlay here is that, yes, there's an opportunity for advisors to help improve the capturing of culture and engagement data, addressing some of those challenges and pain points around over-reliance on survey-based tools, a shift to more continuous listening and culture measurement. There's clearly then a role for more advanced analytics to help address that challenge that clients have got around the lack of in-house capability around analytics. There's clearly help that clients need in prioritizing. So looking at culture data in the context of an organization's strategy and its strategic objectives and its market positioning and its values. And that's a really key place where advisors can add a significant amount of value to drive that prioritization that then unlocks the next stage of delivering action. And clearly then for advisors, there's a role in developing those action plans, engaging with leadership to make sure that that buy-in does exist. And then, of course, making sure that the impact is measurable and can be evidenced through ongoing tracking and monitoring post taking action. And so the final thing I wanted to overlay here is kind of how, when we work with our consulting partners on culture benchmarking, like how Deltabase helps advisors so that the sum of the parts is greater, is greater than their constituent. So the first one is around how we can provide a very rapid, non-invasive and continuous and real-time culture measurement. We've got that 12-topic culture and EVP framework that really helps to give insight on root causes rather than just symptoms. With that benchmarking that we showed and we looked at for Tesla and SpaceX, you can see how we can surface and evidence strengths, weakness versus named competitors, which can really help with prioritization. We can bring in the evidence that makes it easier to get that leadership buy-in to action plans and the reasons why particular actions are recommended. And then finally, once action's been taken, with our continuous listening and our ability to track and monitor culture, behaviors, EVP in real time in a non-invasive way, then it's very, very powerful at being able to do that as part of benefits measurement and really evidencing the impact of action plans. So final summary before we open up to any questions. What we've seen from the research is that the place where clients really need help is around identifying culture risks earlier than they're able to at the moment, help with prioritizing the things that are really going to move the needle, providing continuous insight rather than the once a year periodic insight that they get at the moment, being able to draw that link between culture outcomes and measurement to business performance and strategy, and then being able to measure and demonstrate the impact of interventions as well. So I think there's clearly a shared opportunity for advisors supported by Deltabase to bring differentiated insight that supports better client decisions and triggers that meaningful action and impact that clients are really universally wanting to unlock.
Thank you, Phil. Really great content. Thank you very much for sharing that. I just want to invite our attendees to pop some more questions in the box. Phil, whilst I'm doing that, if you want to just take a look through, we do have a couple in there, and choose which ones you want to answer first. But yeah, please don't be shy. We really want to give as much value as we can during the time that we've got.
So there's one question that's come through here just related to the external employee listening and the online channel. The question there is whether there is negativity bias within the data set, which is a really interesting one. So this is something that we end up talking about quite a lot with customers. There is certainly a very much a misconception, which I think probably is more acute amongst the older generation of leadership, particularly, that employees will only really go and leave reviews on external sites like Glassdoor, Indeed, or Seek.au, whatever it might be, if they've got an axe to grind and they want to make complaints and share negative experiences. Now, of course, we've analysed this ad nauseum, and across 11 million reviews that we have analysed cross sector, cross geography, what we've found is that there is a significant lean towards more positive review content. So when we create kind of an employee net promoter score by taking the percentage of promoters, so these are employees that leave 4-star, 5-star reviews, and subtracting then the percentage of detractors, that would be 1-star and 2-star reviews, we get a global cross-sector average of +48. So an employee net promoter score of +48 is actually very heavily weighted towards more positive content than negative, and that surprises a lot of people who have got that preconception that actually there's more negative content than there is positive, which just isn't the case.
Good, really good. Any other questions coming in? If not, then we'll leave it there and give everyone some time back. Anything else, Phil, that you want to cover before we let people go?
We've got another one here about whether we work directly with clients and HR teams as well as with advisors. Short answer is yes, we do. So far our route to market has been predominantly focused on supporting consultancies. So we work with three of the big four, and we work with some kind of HR specialist consultancies like Mercer and Heidrick and Struggles as well. But we do also get approaches from in-house HR folks that want to understand how they compare directly to their competitors across culture, across talent, across workforce. So yeah, we do work with clients directly as well as supporting our consulting clients.
Great. And we've just had one come in about can we share a demo of the actual platform itself, which yes, we can absolutely do. We can pop in a call some point next week that works for you as well. And that covers the cost question as well. Won't share it now, but we'll share it on a follow-up call. Good. Well, first, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Appreciate your time. I hope it's been really valuable. Phil, thank you so much for presenting today. As I said, I'll be in touch with the webinar recording and any materials that I think will be useful. So thank you very much, and I hope you all have a great afternoon.